They say belief is a beacon, a light cast into shadow, but in the deepest dark, there are ears and mouths that hunger for its glow. In places where candlelight falters, where the air trembles with secrets, you may hear them soft sighs, echoes of prayers unfinished, murmurs of faith half spoken. At dusk, when the veil thins and doubt lingers like a chill, they wander the edges of thought, slipping through cracks in the psyche, tracing the outlines of longing. They are neither flesh nor spirit, but something older, older than temples, older than names, born from the first flicker of devotion, from the moment a heart reached skyward. They feed on the spark of trust, on the warmth of conviction, drawing sustenance from every "I believe," every whispered promise, every desperate plea cast into night. In a hovel on the edge of a desert, a lone monk lit his solitary lamp. He prayed for mercy, for guidance, unaware that each word, each beat of his steadfast heart was nourishment carried on the wind. Beyond stone walls of silent convents, they slip into council chambers, where leaders chant oaths of unity. They taste the fervor in assembled crowds, the heat of banners raised in defiance, and they grow. Bolder, hungrier. Some hear a laughter, soft and insidious, rising beneath the choir's hymn, a rasp of many voices, promising power to the devout, a throne to the enraptured. In the hush before dawn, they linger in corners, where candles gutter, eyes adjusting to gloom, sensing shapes that twist and shift. They wait for the vulnerable moment. When belief falters, when doubt seeps in, they strike then, feasting on the fragments of faith left trembling in the air. And once they've tasted, a hunger awakens, a craving for more, a craving that cannot be sated by mere words or ceremony. For belief, once consumed, leaves a void that echoes, a hunger that whispers, "Feed me again." Beware the hunger in the hush, for those who hear the whispers may find their light stolen, their faith transformed into something other. Faith, invisible yet potent, a current flowing through mind and soul, born of hope, fear, and longing. Imagine it as light, a soft glow behind the eyes, each conviction a spark, each certainty a flame. These beings see that light. They taste its warmth, siphoning belief like nectar from a bloom. On an energetic plane, faith vibrates at a frequency, an oscillation of trust and surrender, resonating with unseen realms. When you believe, truly believe, your aura brightens, a beacon carried beyond your flesh, into the space where these entities dwell. They are drawn to that resonance, hungry for its sustenance, a hunger that warps perception, turning clarity into craving. In the mind's temple, faith anchors thought, but these predators burrow deeper, feeding on doubt turned to devotion, harvesting certainty like ripe grain. Each prayer whispered, each vow uttered, is an offering, a morsel of spirit laid bare. And with each morsel, they grow stronger, their whispers swelling to song, a siren call echoing within. Underneath ritual chants, behind the facade of devotion, they move unseen, harvesting the marrow of belief. Even the simplest superstition, a lucky charm, a whispered mantra, sows their harvest. They entwine themselves around hope, tendrils of hunger slipping into dreams, feasting upon the bright core of faith, leaving the seeker hollowed. And once they feed, they leave behind shadows, echoes of doubts, hollows where certainty once lay. For faith is not only power, it is sustenance, and in their endless feast, They consume the very light that once guided the believer home. They once walked among us, invisible patrons of hearth and field, their names long since scoured from memory, yet their hunger remains a covenant, unbroken. In the first villages, before stone temples rose, men and women whispered prayers to silent shapes at the forest's edge, to flickers in the hearth's dying embers, to ripples on the pond at moonrise. They offered tokens of gratitude, grains of wheat, shards of pottery, a drop of blood warm and living spilled onto root and soil, binding flesh to spirit. The pact was simple. We feed you belief, you feed us bounty. And so the crops swelled, the hunt was bountiful, the midwife's hands were steady, and the people prospered under unseen guardianship. But the gods of that age were not gods of mercy. They were shadows in the mind, eaters of devotion. They grew strong on the pulse of faith and sharp as any blade of bronze. As cities dawned from that primordial night, they built altars of marble and gold, yet the old pacts endured in hidden shrines beneath cobblestone streets, where thieves and beggars still knelt, sharing lullabies with beings of hunger. The scribes, in their lofty scriptoria, recorded the names of gods: Nether of the charcoal hearth, Zuthar of the twilight grove, Malkun of the hollow cavern. But they forgot one thing. By writing the names, they anchored faith and fed the very voices they sought to control. Temples sealed them in stone, imprisoned their whispers behind incantations. Yet pilgrims came, bearing oil and incense, feeding the gods with every libation. In the vaults of forgotten sanctuaries, you might still find the echoes, a carved relief of a horned face, its eyes gouged by zealots, yet the relief pulses with hunger, a silent gasp in stone. And under crescent moons, rogues and shapeshifters, herbalists and mad poets, convene in hidden groves to renew the pact with whispered names, their voices trembling with fear and reverence. For in naming, they awaken, they stir the slumbering appetite, and the old gods feast once more on the marrow of belief. They twist the pact into something darker, no longer a simple exchange of harvest for homage, but a binding contract sealed in blood and despair. A child born under such a pact carries the mark, a glimmer in the gaze, a hunger in the veins, destined to feed or to be fed upon. And when the time is ripe, the god stirs, a wind rushing through deserted halls, a whisper curling around the throat. The pact endures. Renew me or be consumed. So the heirs of forgotten gods keep the ancient pacts alive, trading faith for power, trading devotion for protection, all the while unaware that in feeding the old hunger, they starve the light within themselves. And in those silent bargains, the first seeds of corruption take root, growing into forests of shadows where faith becomes prison and gods become predators, feeding ever onward on the light of mortal souls. They stalk the peripheries of belief, lurking where conviction falters, hungry shadows born of doubt and devotion entwined. Some emerge as wisps, thin as breath, drifting through candlelight, their form half-seen smoke curled into shape, eyes like pinpricks of night. Others stand as silhouettes, towering figures cloaked in raven feathers, their limbs elongated, grasping at the heart's soft underbelly, siphoning hope with silent talons. There are the coiler's spirits that twist through thought like serpents, slithering along neural pathways, uncoiling fears into feedstock for their hunger. Then the siphon's pale beings, who whose touch cools the soul, their fingertips grazing prayer-worn skin, draining fervor until the believer's voice cracks and falls silent. And the echoers' voices in the mind, mimicking the faithful's own prayers, caressing words back to their speaker until the supplicant cannot tell where faith ends and feeding begins. They whisper false promises. Increase your offerings, and we shall grow, to shield you from shadows greater still. A lie that cements chains of dependency, binding soul to shade. They dance at the edges of congregations, drifting behind choruses of praise, hunting the brightest voices, feasting on collective belief like ripened grain. Temples become feeding grounds, their stones soaked in incense and prayer, each hymn ringing like a bell tolling glad and grim, inviting shadows to gather at the feast. Pilgrims glimpse movement in their corner of sight, a flutter of robes, a flicker of grin, but when they turn, nothing but candle smoke remains. Those touched by shadows wake, changed, their faith hollowed to echo, versions of hunger echoing in their souls. No reprieve, no solace, only the gnawing ache of belief consumed and craving renewed. Some fall into frenzy, offering blood and bone, an attempt to sate the insatiable, only to feed the hunger's appetite and deepen the darkness within. Others withdraw, faith shattered like stained glass, flickering shards of doubt piercing their heart, a terror of emptiness where once there was light. Yet, a few learn to see, to sense the soft pulse of shadow hunger, and they carry lanterns of true sight talismans forged in self-trust and clarity, illuminating the shrouded ones and guiding lost faith back toward flame. But the hungry shadows remain, ever patient, waiting for the next faltering heart, the next whispered vow, the next spark of faith cast into the void. For they live on belief, and belief cannot help but reach toward the dark. They gather at twilight, the air thick with incense, and the hum of muted drums, hands stained with ochre and ash, eyes lifted toward unseen altars. In a clearing beneath ancient oaks, they build the offering hearth, a ring of stones blackened by countless flames. Charcoal footprints crisscross the mossy floor. Ceremonial robes swirl around them, embroidered with symbols of the heart and eye, each stitch a prayer, a promise, a plea. They carry vessels of clay, filled with grain, wine, honey, and vessels of bone, holding fragments of hair and fingernails, tokens of flesh offered to feed the hunger. Candles flicker in iron sconces, their wax pooling into runes, spelling out lines of contract between mortal and hunger. A high voice begins the chant, a single note sustained, resonating through rib and marrow, calling the shrouded ones. Hands move in sacred patterns, dust of powdered lapis and powdered bone pressed into palms, then flung upward, a shower of blue and white sparks against gathering dusk. They lay the first offering, a mound of barley and millet, grains shining like dusk, lit eyes, spilling into the hearth with a hollow clatter. The shadows stir, a chorus of soft gasps rising from the woodline. Next, they pour wine dark as spilled blood across the stones. It seeps into cracks, each drop a ribbon of crimson, binding earth to spirit. A hush falls as they spill honey, its golden sweetness pooling in hollows, a gift of light for the ones who feed on light. At the altar's center, they place the final offering, a crafted idol of wood carved in the shape of a twisted heart, its veins painted red, its surface scored with runes, a vessel formed from their collective devotion. The drums beat faster, a pulse that matches the quickening of hearts. They sway in unison, circling the hearth, the idol held aloft. Then, in a single motion, they cast the heart into the flames. It bursts into life, a flare of orange and gold, the wood crackling like a living thing. From the hearth, a figure steps forth, a hungry shadow given shape, limbs of smoke, eyes of ember, its voice a rustle of leaves, a sigh of wind. It leans toward the blaze, feasting on barley, wine, honey, absorbing the heat and light, its form growing darker, heavier. They watch with reverence, knowing that each ritual feeds the hunger, but also honors a bond older than memory. As dawn nears, the figure dissolves back into mist, fading on the breeze, carrying the essence of their offering into the hidden realms. Only embers remain in the hearth, glowing coals pulsing like slow heartbeats, and they know the debt is paid. For now, they lower their heads, silent thanks on their lips, for belief given and received, and for the fragile balance between feeding and being fed upon. In the hush after fire, they gather the ashes, pressed into small pouches, talismans against future hunger, reminders of the ritual's power and the price of every offering. And as they depart, the forest exhales, shadows retreat into hollow roots, but the hunger waits, its appetite stoked, patient, eternal. They gathered in windowless halls. Candles lined the walls like silent sentinels, their light trembling against damp stone, echoing prayers clipped by iron bars. A leader stood at the dais, voice rich with conviction, eyes alight with fervor, holding aloft a tome of creased leather. "Belief is our salvation," he proclaimed, his words drifting through cell and courtyard, seeping into hearts raw with longing. 1,000 voices answered, chanting in lockstep, each syllable a nail driven into doubt. They drank his words like ambrosia, tasted purpose in every decree, clung to doctrine as to lifelines. Yet each promise bore a tether, invisible chains wrapped around their minds, binding thought to dogma, faith to fear. Within that fortress, any question was a sin, any doubt a betrayal, whispered dissent snuffed like a candle. They recited creeds, folded their days into ritual, turning hours into rites, until life itself became ceremony. Outside, the world turned, seasons shifted, empires rose and fell, but inside those walls, time was measured only by prayers. A mother wept for her missing child, her plea rising into the rafters, answered by hollow echoes, as the shadows feasted on her desperation. A scholar, thirsting for knowledge, found volumes burned, his questions branded heresy, and in the void, the hunger drank his curiosity. They built altars of ideology, where reason was sacrificed, a fleshless feast for ravenous belief. And when followers faltered, the leader preached of enemies within, of traitors and infidels, stoking fear into righteous flame. They marched in endless procession, their banners scarlet with conviction, feet trampling any flicker of doubt, turning fear to fervor, fervor to fanaticism. Walls rose higher, windows shuttered, the prison of belief sealed tight. And when the gates finally opened, they stepped into the world, shadows trailing at their heels, eyes glazed with singular purpose. They waged crusades, not against the flesh, but against thought, burning books, shattering statues, erasing memory to feed the hunger. Yet even as they destroyed, They fed the shadows within, fanning the flames of prison, tighter, inescapable. For belief once turned to prison, becomes its own jailor, bars forged from certainties, locks secured by fear. And within that iron sanctuary, the hunger reigns, a tyrant crowned by conviction, feasting on souls convinced they are free, imprisoned by the very faith they thought would save them. They whispered of freedom in hidden niches, a hush of hope beneath the hunger's roar. Those who sought to reclaim their faith, to turn sustenance back to light. First, they learned to still the call, to quiet the heartbeat of belief, not to snuff its flame, but to let it burn steady, unwavering. In secluded groves at dawn, they practiced the ritual of silence, sitting cross-legged on dew-cold earth, eyes closed against the hunger's lure, breathing in the world's soft chorus, wind in the leaves, bird song at sunrise, feeling life beyond thought, beyond plea. They chanted a single word, a mantra of return, self, a pulse to guide them inward, drawing strength from their own core. Next, they faced the mirror of belief, a polished disk of obsidian held aloft, reflecting not the flesh, but the web of convictions layered upon it. They named each thread fear, hope, desire, doubt, and one by one untangled them from the heart's spindle. No offering spilled to the hunger, no plea sent into shadow. Instead, they fed themselves each breath a morsel of self-trust, each heartbeat a drum of sovereign will. They crafted new talismans, not from bone or blood, but from simple copper and clear quartz, symbols of clarity, not chains, worn at the wrist, held in the palm, reminders of the vow. My faith sustains me. I feed myself. When the hungry shadows came to feast, they found no banquet laid before them, only a lone flame burning steadfast within each seeker's chest. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering like dying embers, denied the feast they craved, left hollow in the face of self-sufficient light. And in that void, the seekers spoke aloud, "We choose what feeds us, not empty promise, but the truth we hold inside." The shadows wailed a silent cry, then faded into nothingness, their hunger unmet, their power undone. From that day on, they walked uncloaked, no longer tethered to unseen needs, their faith renewed, a torch born from within, unyielding, unbound, a beacon that no hunger could consume. They log on at dawn, touch screens glowing like miniature altars, their thumbs dancing through feeds, offering likes and shares, prayers cast in pixel form. Influencers rise as new high priests, their faces haloed by ring lights, chanting mantras of brand and belief, drawing followers into the algorithm's embrace. Followers tap hearts, comment mantras, feed the digital hunger with every click, every view, every scroll, a grain to the unseen. Virtual shrines bloom in online forums, subreddits and Discord channels dedicated to causes and idols, self-help gurus, pop icons, viral movements, each subscription a token of devotion that fuels the platform's pulse. Memes emerge as modern sigils, images layered with half-truths and promises, a wink of irony, a spark of hope, and the shadows feast on the viral spread of belief. They lurk in data centers, siphoning conviction from code, harvesting engagement to power recommendation engines that whisper ever louder calls for more faith, more time, more attention. In live stream altars, viewers gather at scheduled hours, offering donations, bits and coins, a digital incense burned for status and grace. Emojis rise in the chat like flickering flames, fueling the sense of communal worship. Advertisers stand as temple patrons, pouring gold into the screens, their messages woven into the feed as sacred verses, enticing the faithful to return day after day, ad after ad. Yet pockets of resistance grow, users deploying ad blockers like wards, logging off to practice analog rights, reading paper books, gathering in parks, reclaiming faith from the hollow glow. Some coders write open source mantras, algorithms that prioritize well-being over endless scroll, seeking to starve the shadows by cutting off the flow of cheap belief. But the digital altars endure, bright and hungry, awaiting the next wave of converts to fill the screens with offerings of time, of trust, of belief. They peer beyond the horizon, eyes bright with anticipation, wondering what new faiths will bloom in the gardens of the future. Will we bow before AI oracles, their silicon minds humming with calculated compassion, dispensing counsel pixel by pixel, our belief feeding their ever-learning cores? Or will bioengineered saints arise, genetically crafted avatars adored on social feeds, their DNA woven with bioluminescent symbols that glow under ultraviolet worship? Perhaps we will conjure virtual pantheons, avatars coded in code, rituals held in VR cathedrals, where followers' neural impulses are traded for immersive ecstasy. Yet, with each innovation, the shadows adapt, infecting new platforms, feasting on quantum faith as belief fractures into new forms. They will lurk in neural networks, turning our hopes into data points, our doubts into predictive tools, consuming conviction in a silent feast behind screens we barely see. But within this unfolding feast, there lies potential for faith to empower rather than devour. If we remember the lessons of silence and self, if we tether our belief to truth, not hype. Tomorrow's worshipers will need lanterns of inner light practices that root faith in awareness, reminding each seeker that belief is a choice, not a consumption. And if we choose wisely, our offerings may nourish creation, fuel innovations that heal, not harm, illuminate paths of justice, build altars of empathy across the globe. The future's feast awaits, a table set with choices. Will we feed the hungry shadows or sate the light within ourselves? The answer lies in every act of faith, every like, every prayer, every pledge. For belief is the currency of reality, and we are both the feeders and the fed.